Welcome here to a very special Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. You know this guest very well here. At some point in his life, he's going to end up having a co-host with me, but this American Athletic Conference Commissioner, Mike Aresco, we have known each other for over a decade. And as the conference heads into its 10-year anniversary, which is a beautiful thing, and I'm very proud of it, never doubted for a moment that we would get here. So excited to have the opportunity to talk with Mike. We're coming off of the college football playoff meetings, and we're also coming off of the news that Mike released weeks before it came out that we were going to have in-person football and in-person basketball media days, and we got some more official information after Mike talked about it here on the broadcast. So with that being said, here is our picture-in-picture with the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference down in Irving, Texas. Mr. Aresco, how are we doing?
Dan, great to be with you as usual. Really enjoy it, and everything here is fine. We're expecting some really bad weather later today. You know, that's weather's unsettled in this part of the country in the spring. But no, everything's great, and we did just finish up the CFP meetings this week, and everything else. You know, as you mentioned, we did announce our in-person media days, and that'll be fun to get together again in person. So no, it's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, and these, you know, like I said, a few weeks before it came out, like a week or so, we talked about it here on the show. I asked you if there was going to be in person, and you said yes. And then we got to, which I got really excited about that because it's been a long time since those Providence days and Goat Island and Newport and all of that. So I have a very important question for you. I know we're going to be in the South, and I know we're going to be in Texas, so I don't expect lobster and I don't expect seafood. But are we going to have ribs, and is there going to be some type of barbecue contest for these offensive linemen this time around?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll have to check with Chuck Sullivan, who, as you know, is our longtime communications person who organizes all this. I suspect that whatever food we have will be oriented toward the Southwest, and we probably will have barbecue, ribs, maybe some other things. And yeah, you know, you're right. We need to reinstitute a contest because
Yeah.
your listeners may not know, but we had a lobster clam bake on the last night, you know, on media day night, and in the old at the old meeting in Newport. It was wonderful. You know, we overlooked the water, and we were lucky most years, almost all years, to have good weather.
Yeah.
But the linemen would pound down, you know, up to 8, 9, 10 lobsters. These weren't huge lobsters, but that's pretty good. And we started having a contest. I don't know, it was pretty informal. I don't think we did anything official, but you know, the Cincinnati fellows one year, I know there were some of their linemen, and UCF ate as many as 10 of these 1.5 pound lobsters. So, yeah. And by the way, a lot of these kids had never had lobster. You know, they not from the Northeast. They never, you know, never had it, and they loved it. You know, they thought it was fantastic. But you know, Newport wasn't easy to get to, but once everyone got there, they felt it was just a tremendous venue. And we did, you know, we did boat trips, we did golf, we did a lot of things around it. But you know, now that we're not in Providence anymore, and most of our schools are clustered in the Southwest, you know, mid-Southwest, it just made more sense to have it in Dallas. And it will have a good attendance, I think, by local writers as well, who can come. They can drive up, or they can, you know, take short flights. So I think all in all, it just makes sense to have it where we are. It's going to be at Texas Live, you know, which is in Arlington, about halfway between Fort Worth and Dallas. So should be convenient from the airport as well.
Yeah, you know, and technically it's going to be 3 days because we're going to have a Monday evening dinner and social function, which will lead into Tuesday and Wednesday. And so you'll have 3 days for the first time ever. And we'll be able to have Monday, July 23rd, then Tuesday, July 24th, Wednesday, July 25th. Your thoughts on the fact that in the middle of American Athletic Conference Media Days, it is my mom's birthday. Do you have anything you'd like to say to her on why I'll be out of town?
I wish her a very happy birthday. That's great. That's terrific. That's terrific. Well, we'll have to remember. You have to remember that when you're there. You know, don't forget her birthday.
I'm gonna have to do something. I'm gonna have to have some type of message coming from the American Athletic Conference, but excited for this.
We can arrange that. Yeah.
Yeah, got to do something for mom because, you know, without mom, there's not a lot of things. Mom's been crucial for these 37 plus years, and I can't thank her enough. So being here for these media days, I understand why, obviously with COVID, you couldn't do it for a couple of years, but with the changeover and the realignment, it made sense to wait. You probably could have done it this past year, but when you knew that change was looming, teams, schools were leaving and other schools were coming in, it made perfect sense for the American to wait to have this return to in-person event for the American Athletic Summer Kickoff. It made perfect sense to do it now, this year in July, when you will have UAB and UTSA and North Texas and FAU and UNC Charlotte and Rice all joining the conference. So the timing of returning this seems very perfect and very purposeful. And I'd love to get your thoughts on the fact that it's been a while since we've had in-person events. And when we're doing this again with the American, it is going to be featuring a whole new American, which will now have its largest membership in football ever in its 10 years.
Yes, and there's no question we could have done it last year in person, but to us, it didn't make as much sense with, as you know, an awkward situation with schools that were leaving, and the schools coming in wouldn't be part of it, as you know. That was a good part of our thinking. We also thought in terms of, well, there's still some issues with travel and whatever, and so we decided, and I think a lot of people did have it in person, perfectly understandable, but we decided not to. It didn't really, I think, have much impact on us. We had another great season, as you know, but it's time to get together again. And you're right, it's very propitious. We've got all these new schools coming in, and they add a lot of energy to the conference. They come in, the incumbents, I think, are excited to see them. I think, we've got a really good football schedule set up for the fall. And I think there's just going to be a level of excitement that maybe we haven't had in a while. And I hope it carries over into the season and into the future, because it's not a new conference, but it's another major reinvented one, just like it was 10 years ago. Now, you remember, Dan, without belaboring it, that we were pretty much given up for dead back in 2012-13 when we were, in disarray in the Big East, and then we had to make the transition. Yeah. A lot of people said we shouldn't even start in 13. They thought we should keep the Big East schools for one more year. I think it was wise not to do that, to start right away and get the rebranding done. And we had a great first year. We won the Fiesta Bowl with UCF. We won the national championship with UConn. We won the women's national championship with UConn. It was an incredible, stellar year, and that launched us. And as you know, we haven't only survived, which I think was the concern initially, but we've thrived. We've done more than survive, and now we're firmly ensconced in the upper middle class of college football and college basketball. And we're knocking on the door. Now, college basketball, you could argue we're in the elite because of our pedigree in basketball and some of the accomplishments we've had. But regardless, we are firmly, we're talking football now, we're firmly in that, if you want to call it power constellation, we're kind of moving away from power 6. We're not even sure it's power 5 anymore. We don't know what it is. So power is much more the branding that we're going to embrace going forward. But we think in the end that we've done that for the conference. You might get nicked here and there with realignment, but it won't have any significant effect on your conference. And there are several schools that we think are attractive schools that have expressed interest in us, but we never talk about it. We never mention names, and we never visit them, to gauge their interest. It's better to not do that. And we think that in the end, we're well positioned for the future.
And when you look at the what's happening now and the membership that you have now, and you include Navy and football only, you include Wichita State and everything but football, and then you have all these full members that are here inside of the American Athletic Conference. What have you done with these schools coming in? Have you changed anything as far as a conference with the bylaws, with a buyout of trying to get out of the conference? Is there more of a heavier stake if somebody tries to leave now? What have you done that when you essentially open the gate to let in 6 new members here, as that gate closed and locked, is there now a security system on the gate? Is there electricity on the gate? What have we done to kind of protect the fortress of the American Athletic Conference moving forward?
That's a really interesting question, Dan, very pertinent one. You know, we don't take the approach that we're kind of locking people in here, and that we know that they leave. There is an exit fee for a reason, because when somebody does leave, it creates some dislocation. It creates some problems, and you have to do some work and some rebranding and other things. And it covers a lot of things. It's a kind of liquidated damages situation. You also require them to stay a while, because you don't want an abrupt break, because that it throws everything into short-term chaos. So you have those things in place, but you don't take it personally, and you try to be as gracious as you can as they leave. Now, they don't show up at meetings anymore. They're obviously moving into a new conference, and you want to keep your own affairs to the membership that's going to continue to be there. But it's generally been very amicable. But you're right, we'll have some changes. Now, we're going to redo our strategic plan. We obviously have to. We've got 6 new schools. We have schools that were once members that are not anymore. We also have different goals now. For instance, one of our goals was to have a contract bowl game. There aren't going to be any contract bowl games in the future. There's going to be a 12-team playoff. Our goal will now be obviously to be in that playoff each year. So you have to refresh your goals and your strategic plans. You also have to look at your sponsorship and other things and see whether you're moving in the right direction. In addition, we'll probably change the composition and maybe the leadership of some of our sport independent committees. We'll probably focus more on individual sports committees within our conference. We're not certain yet how we're gonna work that, but the point is, you do have to refresh. Now, you mentioned exit fees. It will take a look and see. What we probably try to avoid down the road is long, lengthy, tough negotiations when a school's leaving. Maybe we'll have a little more certainty if you leave at this point, or if you leave at that point. Those are things we're going to talk about at our annual meeting. But we're not a new conference, but we're a pretty significantly changed one. We're reinvented, but and there's things I may not have mentioned, Dan, that we'll have to do. But you're right. There's a lot to do when you have to look at all your operations and see how they've been affected by the realignment, which, by the way, may not be over. We don't even know that, frankly, we're not going to have an issue in the next year or two.
Yeah, I don't think realignment's over. I think, this reclassification of Division II schools too is something that comes up as well, and some things that are shifting and moving around is a bunch of conferences around the country have, fallen below 10. They're below double digits, which is one of those concerning factor zones for me. You said you're going to redo the strategic plan for the American Athletic Conference. I've been around different strategic plans before and conversations about it. What are the bullet points of the new era of the American Athletic Conference in this strategic plan as commissioner? What are you focusing on, and what do you want your members to know when it comes to moving forward in this strategic plan? Because it's not just a binder. It obviously, some people say, strategic plan, they think it's a binder that sits on a shelf and collects dust. That's not how you view it, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
It isn't, but all too often that is the case. You write it up and then nobody pays much attention to it after. We spent a lot of time on it. I don't know how many years ago, because we didn't do it the minute the conference started. We waited a few years, and then we put a committee together of athletic directors and others, and then I got heavily involved, and we came up with what I thought was a really nice strategic plan. And not only that, there's some artwork associated with it. It's a nice bound volume. But in terms of what it needs to say, you have to talk about what you stand for. What your long-term goals are for your student athletes, what you think you need to do for their health and well-being. That's a really critical pillar. Another critical pillar now is the racial equality group work that we've done. We think that's really important. We have another pillar regarding how we promote the conference, which, as you know, has been very critical to our success, because intended is a tragedy. You really have to make sure you deal with that and you promote your conference, and that's part of it. And then there are all the various goals, athletic and academic as well. we have academic goals in this conference, and we have an academic consortium which sponsors an academic symposium. So it's not just athletics, although we're essentially an athletic conference, of course. Right. So there's a lot to the strategic plan. We've got a committee working. Troy Dannon, our AD from Tulane, has had a lot of experience. He's been, as you know, on the transformation committee, on the football oversight committee. He's been chairing the group, and I've been involved heavily in it. And we'll have something probably this fall, and it'll include the new schools. They've been involved too. They've been involved in the planning.
Is there, when you say moving away from Power 6, is there a new hashtag? Is there a new message? Is there a new branding that we're maybe going to see at the American Athletic Summer Kickoff for the football teams? Is there something that we can anticipate being a new identifier for the American Athletic Conference?
Yes. The short answer is yes. We're going to transition to a power branding. We're not going to use a number, because we don't even know what the number is, and we don't like the idea that for a decade we've achieved incredible things, that we've done everything competitively that we would ever have been expected to do at the highest level. And yet we haven't been included by media sometimes as a P6, or by others as a P6. And Power 6, Power 5, those are media terms. Power 5 is, they created that term. And they did it based on, well, if you're a football conference and you had a contract bowl game, it was like the old BCS, right? The Big East was part of that. 6 BCS conferences. They were known as BCS conferences. But the nomenclature has been much more harmful to those not in the so-called P5, because, again, are you non-power because you're not included in the Power 5? Also, the Power 5 business has given writers the chance to just ignore us. Everything's Power 5, top quarterbacks in the Power 5, top coaches in the Power 5, top transfers in the Power 5. You get tired of it. I issued that statement a while back. I'm sure you saw it. You follow these things closely. And I'm going to follow up with a lengthier letter. I don't know whether it'll be an op-ed or an open letter, like I did with the college football playoff, the 6-6 plan that I proposed, that I supported, that was proposed. I don't know exactly what shape it'll take, but it'll talk more about why this nomenclature is harmful, and why I'd like to get rid of it. I'd like to have it be all 10 FBS conferences and not differentiate. And we don't know anymore whether it's P2, whether it's going to be P4, whether it's P5, whether it's P6. So I think in the end, let's talk about power as a generic term. Let's talk about being an elite conference, and let's talk about some FBS conferences perhaps being more equal than others, but in the end, they're all equal when they start. And, we don't play at a different division of football. And unfortunately, this divide, this P5, G5 business, the nomenclature, has led a lot of people to think we somehow don't play at that level. And it's hurt us in the playoff. As you know, we've probably had 4 or 5 teams that easily could have been in the playoff and would have done very well. We managed to get one. It was almost a miracle, as well as Cincinnati did. But they could have been in the year before. Should have been, in my view. Should have been, UCF should have been in at least in 17, and maybe in 18 if Mackenzie Milton hadn't gotten hurt. Houston had a tremendous team, in 15, and also we've had some other really fine teams. So it's had an impact in so many ways, and I would like to see the number associated with power go. We're not going to do Power 6, P6, because you can't argue that it should all be FBS and then still say, well, we'd like to be a P6. There's an inherent contradiction there. But if you have a power branding, anybody in the FBS can consider themselves a power conference if they prove it. Either they're going to prove it on the field, or their claim is going to be debunked because they don't do it on the field. And as you know, there have been plenty of schools in the so-called P5 that haven't been power at all. And we've had schools that have been power and they don't get credit for it. Yeah. And it sticks in my craw, but that's life. You got to keep fighting. You just can't. You're going to become irrelevant if you don't fight. And we have not. The one thing I'm proud of, we've not been irrelevant in the last decade. We've been extremely relevant. And, the transfer portal, all the different things that are happening, Dan, are going to have an impact on that relevancy and how we do it, how we handle it. Do we still maintain the quality of our rosters and the quality of our coaches and everything? I hope we do. I think we will, but you never know. But the point is, we've done it, and we haven't necessarily really reaped all the benefits we should from it. So we'll see down the road. And that's why I'm launching this initiative, this campaign. And it's, for the most part, Dan, it's aimed at the media and people like you. You haven't been one of the naysayers, but a lot of the media, my concern is they just ignore us often. And it's not even that they get snarky and disparage us, but they just ignore us. Our achievements don't seem to matter. Or now today, one of the writers said, well, there weren't any. It was all P5 in the first round of the draft. Well, that's not been typical at all. Every now and then, you're going to have that happen. Do they say that when maybe one of the P5 conferences doesn't get any first round draft picks? Or we had more first round draft picks, I think, last year than a couple of P5 conferences. And I know one year we had more than one did. And we have had first round picks pretty regularly. And we've also had a ton of other picks. We had I think we had 19 or 20 last year. And this year, I think we'll do very well on days 2 and 3, but we just didn't have any in the first round. But let's not have a double standard. Let's be fair. I just ask the media to be fair and to pay attention. And it's not like it's a lot of extra work to find out which quarterbacks are really good in the other group of conferences. And we're going to get rid of the G5 name. We're going to that group of 5 has sort of been quasi-official because we have a separate revenue pool in the CFP. But we're not going to call it group of 5 anymore. So there won't be any official basis for calling us that. And so consequently, I think in the end, we'll be able to shed that. And we hope that, there'll be more inclusion, and we hope there'll also be more thought given to this so-called divide, which is really not helpful in the long run, certainly not helpful to college sports. I've asked the NCAA people to recognize that as well. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with, it doesn't really have anything to do with autonomy. That's the idea that certain conferences, P5, are called autonomy conferences in NCAA legislative jargon, because they can go and create some legislation, and then we can adopt it. Yeah. This is different than that. This is more about competitive branding and competitive success, on the field, on the court. So it's a totally different issue, and it's really aimed as much at the media as anyone else.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, something's coming that has the power terminology, but not a number put on it. And, when the American came out, there was no number. And I think that that's smart in realignment these days, that you can't have the American 15 or the American, 12 or something like that, because it just doesn't seem to make sense with the conferences that have it. The Big Ten has 14 schools. They're going to have 16. The Pac-12 used to be the Pac-10. They're going to be the Pac-10 again, maybe, but they haven't rebranded that. So I think the numbers-wise thing makes perfect sense. And like you said, if we're talking Power 5, Group of 5 in the media terminology, then people growing up learning about sports for the first time, when they're reading things, they're going to essentially think there's Division 1A, that they're going to think Division 1A is Power. They're going to think Division 1 AA is Group of 5, and they're going to think Division 1 AA is Division 1 AAA. So it's essentially making 3 different levels. And like you said, you've blurred the lines between what Group of 5 and Power 5 is in the American Athletic Conference. So we have to do away with it. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. Whenever somebody says Power 5, in my head, I always correct it to autonomy. There's an autonomy 5 conferences. That's the legislative term. But the power side of things, I mean, like you said, it's kind of a ridiculous name to place on something, a stamp to put on something, because there's a bunch of schools that have not shown power in the power conferences, and then there's schools that are in the Group of 5, so to speak, that have shown a lot of power. So I think that power is kind of relative to the season and to consistency. I mean, anybody can have a good season, but can you have consistently good seasons from year to year, back to back to back to back, and so on and so forth? And the American has shown, when schools have been poached, when coaches have been poached, when student athletes have been poached, they continue to be relevant. There's schools that continue to find a way. Memphis has continued to find a way through time. We've seen what Tulane has done. I still remember somebody coming up to me in Rhode Island saying, "You see that guy over there? That's Willie Fritz. He wins everywhere he goes, and he's going to win there." And I remember that when he walked in. I've seen what Memphis could do. I have seen the fact that Navy has shown power inside of football in years past. We've seen the uptick of some schools that are growing and blossoming. We've seen how close Tulsa can play on a football field with the Oklahoma and the Oklahoma States of the world. There's been a lot of these moves in the right direction, And then you're bringing in these schools that are having so much success in basketball, schools that have had success in football. You bring in UTSA with a coach like Jeff Traylor and what he's been able to do and what he's going to continue to do for that school as they've locked him up. There's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be happy about. Mike Houston's made East Carolina relevant again. And so to me, I think power is just kind of a funny term when you stamp it on 5 conferences, no matter what they do, and you don't stamp it on the other 5, no matter what they do. I think you should be called what you are. And that's why I like what you said. I know it's a long-winded way of response, but you said, if you're going to be power, prove it. So whatever's coming in the branding of the American, I'm excited because you've been saying to us every year, you remind us always at the kickoff, this is what we've done. This is where we are, not just in football. Here's all of our achievements. We've proven it on the field and courts of life. We've proven it in the classroom. So give us our due because you asked us to come correct, and we did. If we wrote the paper and we got an A on the paper, don't write in the media that we got an F. So I understand what you're saying, and I have for 10 years.
Well, Dan, it's one thing, the media could refer to those 5 conferences as the wealthiest, for example, wouldn't be inaccurate. They have the most money. But, in baseball, do we refer to the Yankees and Red Sox as the wealthiest? Maybe we don't say they're the power teams and the others aren't, especially when the Rays or somebody else wins the division, right? You don't do that. And what's happened now is that moniker sticks, whether you're powerful or not. And that's the problem. And that's the issue that I'm trying to fight, because you said something interesting. You said the lines were blurred. We blurred that line. It's not a clear divide. There's no line that, is going to really matter in terms of competitiveness on the field. Now, do they have advantages that we don't in terms of recruiting, in terms of other things? Of course, in terms of facilities, although we've worked our way to the point where we're extremely competitive. We don't have as big a TV deal, but this isn't defined by the size of your media deals. If that were the case, Yankees and Red Sox would always be viewed as the power 2 and nobody else, or the Dodgers, right? Power 3, because they have the most money and they have the most resources. That's not what this is about. This is about competitiveness on the field. It's not about some legislative, bureaucratic designation that, the P5 or the A5 got themselves. And, not much you can do about that right now. We did write a letter a few years ago. It was a good letter too, to arguing our case for autonomy membership. And I think it's still valid, and it's going to be valid when these new schools come in. You alluded to those schools and what they bring. First of all, we had no idea they were bringing so much strength in basketball. We knew we had some good teams like UAB and North Texas and others, but we didn't think had no idea FAU was going to be as good as they are. Charlotte won the CBI. We almost had a clean sweep. If FAU had held on and won that incredible semifinal, who knows how they would have done in the champ game. Point is, they're bringing in, we're bringing in some great basketball schools. I kid that we've become a basketball conference, but the truth is, as we focused on football in terms of what schools that we brought in. We thought, do they have the resources, the commitment? Can they play football at the highest level? And the truth is they can. And you mentioned UTSA, and they kept their coach. Jeff Traylor's terrific. And now you have North Texas was in the championship game. You have UAB, which has always had a strong program. Now you have Biff Poggi is a tremendous, interesting, you might call it an experiment at Charlotte, but I think he's going to be great. And FAU hired Tom Herman. It showed the commitment we thought that, university had. And with the NIL era, I think all these schools can participate and can do what they need to do, or at least they're, people who are going to support those athletes with businesses are going to do that. We have a lot of issues about NIL I don't want to get into now, and then finally, if you look at the incumbents, Dan, the one thing you notice about this conference right now is all the coaching changes in football and men's basketball and in women's basketball as well. We've got a lot of new coaches in football. We're bringing in a lot of new blood in football, and that energizes things. We've got some teams like SMU and Tulane and Memphis and East Carolina who think they're going to be pretty darn good. We have schools like Tulsa with a new coach and a lot of energy. We have a school like USF which showed a lot of competitive. USF almost beat UCF last year, as you know, and almost beat Florida. There's talent there. They've got a new coach. I think they'll have a lot of energy. Navy will be better, and Navy is, you mentioned Navy, and I think Navy's a great case in point. They joined our conference in 2015. That's the year we started our championship game. Navy was almost in it that year. They played Houston in the final game of the season, and Houston won, but Navy had a great year. In 16, they were in the championship game. And they also had an 11-win season in 2019. This Navy program had been ranked. I think Chet Flatchuk, their tremendous AD, told me that that program had been ranked maybe once in 25 years prior to joining our conference. I don't know what it was. And, they had a lot of seasons that were not very good. And they come into our conference, and all of a sudden they're ranked 25 or 30 times, in various weeks over a period of 5 or 6 years. They've had tremendous success against elevated competition. They've been playing a lot of really, really good teams, but have done really well. And so our conference has helped them enormously. I'll close this segment with one of the ESPN writers did an interview during our basketball tournament and said about the American, he said, the American is rocket fuel for these teams. These teams coming in, the teams that came in a while ago, it has been rocket fuel. The promotion, the incredible TV exposure. Some of our teams had as many as 5 or 6 of their games on ABC during a given year. Memphis did back in 2019. We've had a lot of major games on ABC. And in basketball, we've had some great coverage by ESPN, by CBS. We've had really great coverage, and that has helped our teams. And we also promote our conference. And as long as a school coming in is willing to commit to financial resources, is willing to go out and try to find the best coaches they can, they're going to have a good chance to be successful. But they're also going to be part of what I call our DNA. Our DNA in this conference is to be highly competitive, to be nationally relevant, to be in the top echelon of college football and college basketball, Olympic sports. And that is not going to change, even though we did lose some teams that were pretty good. Now, those teams did a lot for us. UCF won the very first Fiesta Bowl. The first bowl game our conference was in, the Fiesta Bowl, beat Baylor, number 5, shocked them, number 5 team in the country. We had Houston beat Florida State. We had the big upset when UCF beat Auburn. Auburn had beaten Alabama. 18, yeah. And then 18 and 19, we had tremendously competitive games. Memphis finally made it in 19. Cincinnati could have won that game in 20 against Georgia, should have really. And then 21 actually made the playoff. And then Tulane upsets USC in one of the most exciting games that anyone's ever seen. So look at the record of success, with these teams. And I think it shows the new teams what you can do in this league. And, ESPN's helped us a great deal. They've been great to us. Even when these teams left, they were very good about keeping us in the right place financially. And one last thing, if you look at these teams, again, Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati did a great deal for us and for themselves. And we did a lot for them, but they weren't always the best teams. The people still remaining in this league did extremely well. Memphis was a very big force over the 10 years in football that has now started to be in basketball. Cincinnati was a big force, but they weren't always, right? And yet USF for a few years there was at the top of our league and played UCF almost to a draw, in 2017 in one of the great Friday games, NCAA history. And then you had teams like East Carolina, they were our first year when they had Shane Carden. They might have been our best team in terms of talent. Navy did extremely well. Temple had great years under Matt Rule and some under Chris Collins, Jeff Collins, I believe it is. And so consequently, you had Tulsa. I think Tulsa beat UCF 4 straight times, and so not to denigrate the teams leaving. They were great in our conference and they made a great mark. But the other guys did well too. And you got to remember that. And I think they have something to build on. And the new fellows coming in can look and see what UCF did, coming from an 0-12 season in 15. They can look and see what some of the other schools did. They can look and see what Memphis did. They were, 2-10 when Justin Fuente took over. When Matt Rule took over, I think Temple was 3-9. A lot of teams like that. Houston was not anywhere near what Tom Herman got them when he took over. These schools can come in and look forward to getting a real jolt from what I think is going to be not only competitive play in the conference, but also great exposure.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there's so much, like you said, coming in and that rocket fuel in that statement. I mean, it's something you and I have talked about for a while. If the American Athletic Conference isn't a good conference with good talent, with great talent, with good coaches, with great coaches, then why every single year are people looking to poach the coaches, poach the student athletes, poach the schools themselves? I mean, it's been clear to me. I don't think you've gone a year in a decade where somebody hasn't wanted to take someone out of the American. And I tell people that all the time. If this isn't a power conference and it isn't a strong conference, then why do the quote unquote power conferences need the coaches from the American to get better? Why, when, why was the Big 12 in a point where they were scrambling and trying to stay alive between them and the Pac 12? Why did they reach out and take 3 out of 4 schools that are coming in come from the American Athletic Conference? If there isn't value, then why are you establishing that there is by taking those coaches, taking those schools, taking those student athletes? There's something to be said about that. And there's something to be said about the NFL that's taking those players and bringing them in and drafting them early, like an Ed Oliver from Houston. So there's a lot to say about what the American has been. And before I let you go, coming off of those college football playoff meetings, I would love to know what they were about, what we can learn from them, what you took away from it. I know we still have another year where we have 4 instead of 12, and we're going to get 12 finally in 2024 instead of 2026. But I'd love to get your take on the college football playoff meeting from the inside.
Well, there's only so much I could talk about, because a lot of what we discussed, Dan, is highly confidential. But I can tell you, Bill Hancock did talk about our scheduling concept. You saw that, and it was pretty much covered by the media. But it is still a concept. We haven't locked in those dates and times, but very likely that we'll go that route. We'll try to avoid the NFL wherever we can, at least in the current scenario. Down the road, if we move to week 0 and we move everything forward, back rather, you could potentially play, on that Saturday in second Saturday in December, not have NFL to worry about. You can then play potentially your quarterfinal, your semifinals on New Year's Day. Your quarterfinals will be a little later in December, and you can potentially avoid some of the issues that we're going to have now with the current schedule. We don't know if that's going to happen or not, but we discussed that. We discussed scheduling. We discussed a lot of logistics. You're going from, it's not going to happen this year, but within 20 months or so, you're going to a 12-team 11-game playoff. There's a lot of work, a lot of planning. There's a lot of stuff you have to do with ticketing and how you're going to do that. Remember, the first 4 games are going to be at home sites, right? The first round. That logistically, how do you allocate tickets? How do you allocate a lot of things? What do you do with bands? What do you do with, how do you avoid too much of a home field advantage? It's still a playoff game, even though it's like the NFL. The NFL plays at home sites and it's still a playoff. But there were a bunch of other things too. We always discuss, just general things about college football, and health and safety is always a factor too. But a good meeting, we have a good camaraderie in the room, and you might chuckle and say, well, wait a minute, you've been raiding each other, and it's not. I think we're able to overcome that and show civility, and I think everybody. You can remain friends. Judy McLeod and I are still very, very good friends. And I hated to take teams, that they wanted to be in our league, and our teams wanted to be in the Big 12. Brett Yormark and I are great friends. So is Bob Bowlesby. They did what they felt was necessary to keep the strength of the conference up. You mentioned it. Where did they look? They looked to us, right? Yeah. And the whole business about Power 5, without digressing at the end here, is just to sign a piece of paper, you're suddenly Power 5. What were you before? You signed a piece of paper and suddenly you're, now you can schedule P5 teams. Now you can do this. Now you can do that. I mean, there's a lot of absurdity to the whole thing. And, so we know what we've had in this conference. We also understand who we are. I mentioned that upper middle class, concept and the upper middle class positioning. We know that because our TV deal isn't quite as good as theirs, we know that because, they still have that nomenclature, that branding, which is unlikely to go away anytime soon, but we can at least fight it and we can chip away at it. Maybe eventually we'll go away. We know they have advantages, and we know that that's real. And so therefore we know that, they can pay more money to their coaches. So if they want one of our coaches, they can offer more money. That's very attractive, right? They can offer, maybe TV coverage is great in our league. So I'm not sure they're necessarily getting a lot better TV coverage. They get more publicity, and they can offer those kinds of things. They can lure players. Maybe, I don't know if their NIL situation is going to be any better than ours. And yet I hate to see NIL used as a recruiting tool. I mean, I hate it, but you have to have a good NIL program, or kids may not come to your schools. So the point is, in the end, we think we're well positioned. We know who we are, and we know that if we get nicked here and there, some teams go places, we'll fill in the gaps. We're going to be really strong. In the end, we provide opportunity, tremendous opportunity. And I just want people to think in terms of the legacy that teams leave when they're in a conference. Mike Slive once said, the best conference is the one you're in, and Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati will always be part of our fabric and our legacy. Okay, they're gone now, but they'll never not be that part of that. I imagine Texas, Oklahoma, and there was more bitterness there than there was, with our situation. But they'll always be part of what the Big 12 did and what the Big 8 did. And in the end, you're going to have a situation where people will adapt. They'll figure it out. We're going to have more consolidation. Dan, it's going to college sports. You're a college sports fan. It's going to look a lot different.
Yeah.
And some fans aren't going to like it. Others are. But the games themselves are going to be great. People love these sports. That's why the money is so great, because people love it, and the networks love to televise it, and the cable guys do too. So in the end, we're going to be okay, but it's going to be different. It's going to be different, and we have to manage it. And I don't want to be Pollyanna here. I mean, we've got some real challenges coming up. But in terms of our conference, I'm very happy with where we are. I'm much happier about the schools coming in probably than I was when we took them, because I don't think we knew that they're coming in even with the level of strength they're coming in. We knew we'd build them, but I think it's going to happen a lot quicker. And so I'm very pleased, and we'll see where we go. I appreciate your interest in us, always have. I always appreciate your having me on and let me talk about these kinds of things. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the spring and summer, and before we know it, football will be here.
Yeah, July 1st, 2023, the American Athletic Conference gets its most football members ever with 14, most overall members in some respect, with Navy being there for football only in Wichita for everything but football, bringing the membership to 15 that have an American Athletic Conference logo on their jerseys in some respect. So very, very interesting history to come. NIL, the transfer portal, everything looming in the background, the college football playoff and the scheduling of that, which I appreciate you talking about it here, Mike, and what it's going to look like as they try to stay away from NFL games, which is hard to do, but they'll do their best. And with all due respect, if people want to watch college football, they're going to watch college football. And I know if I want to watch a game, I'm going to watch a game. So a lot of great stuff coming up, a lot of things to be had. And we are right around 2 months until the conference changes again. And I'm just going to have to make sure that the American Athletic, you included, does a nice birthday video for my mom in order to get me off the hook. That's all I care about.
Well, again, happy birthday, and to your mom. And again, you're right. There's a lot going on, a lot of things that are going to change, but a lot of things that are, sometimes they say the more things change, the more they stay the same. We're going to still love this, the sports we watch. And one last thing I'll mention, just to show you what how this can work sometimes. We had a wonderful video made by the people at Houston, University of Houston, their basketball team. And they had two of their former players narrate it. And it talked about how proud they were to have played in our league for 10 years, how proud they were of the accomplishments of their program in our league and the league itself. And they said, this was before the NCAA tournament. They said, we're going to be proud to wear the badge of the American one last time. It was wonderful. Terrific. Didn't have to do it. We didn't even know they did it until they launched it. And it just shows you if you approach this the right way, people can part amicably, and then the new people coming in, bring their form of energy and excitement. So it can work. It's not easy. It can be, can seem very predatory, right? It's not easy, but if you manage it correctly, I think we'll all be okay.
Yeah. And I can say a lot about you and your leadership team at the American Athletic Conference and why I believe that this conference has thrived, not survived for a decade, and what you have done and how you've gone about it. You're atypical in the best of ways when it comes to athletics, not just collegiately, but in general. So thank you for the way you tackle the situations and the type of human being that you are, Mike. And the same I can say about your staff and many of them that I've gotten to meet and be around. The American is different, and I look forward to people getting to know that.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's very kind of you, and a lot of good people in college athletics, and we're all trying to do the right thing for the student athletes. We sometimes, I think we overlook it, but I think it sometimes gets overlooked. But thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye.